Hi, and thanks for listening. Before we begin, we just wanted to reassure you that if you have worked with any of our hosts or guests, that we treat your privacy with the utmost of respect. Therefore, you won't hear us divulging any confidential or identifiable details about you or your loved one in any of our episodes. Unless, of course, you would like to be featured as a guest yourself and talk about your experiences. In which case, please do get in touch with us via the contact details at the end of the show. That said, let's get on with the next episode. Welcome to Over My Dead Poddy, the podcast that aims to bust those myths about funerals and help you have more comfortable conversations with your loved ones about death, dying, and all things funerals. I'm Nichola Reeder and I'm joined by Carl. Carl, how are you doing today?
Hi everybody, yes, really well, thank you.
So as you will know, if you've followed all of our socials, we've had a few false starts. We've had a change to our presenter lineup, we've had a slight delay in launching episodes, but Carl and I are here and we are committed to bringing you the chats, the conversations and all the advice and tips that we can think of from our experience in the industry that helps you just feel more comfortable about this whole topic that seems so scary. So we're going to dive straight in. And Carl, I'm going to ask you the question first. What do you think it is that people are most scared about in terms of having conversations or meeting funeral directors or people like myself, celebrants?
So for me, I think really the first call and obviously getting in touch with a funeral director is quite a daunting process for some families, as often they've never really done it before. So, the first step of calling a funeral director often is the most daunting for me.
So what I was really hoping to do when I first started thinking about this podcast was just show people that anybody they deal with is human, and we're here to help you understand what your choices are, to feel like you're back in control of the process, and to make sure that the funeral we put together with you really reflects your loved one's life and brings as much colour to remembering them as we possibly can. So Carl, I started talking to you really early on in the year about how we could bring this to life. But what were your thoughts? What were you hoping to get out of us launching a podcast?
Yeah, so when you approached me about this idea, I genuinely thought this was one of the best ideas I'd heard in a long time. Because when we go to see families, they really have no idea what to expect or what questions we're going to be asked. So literally to do this podcast and just have these discussions, I'm hoping just to open up things and make people feel a little more ease about what's to come, definitely.
And that's such an important point around, we can talk about the things that we think are important, but what really matters to us is what's important to you. So please do keep getting in touch with us via our DMs, via email. We'll give you all our contact details later in the show. But let us know what it is you want to talk about and the questions that you want us to answer. Or even if you want to come on the show and talk about your experiences, that will really help other families as well. So we've mentioned in our introductions that I'm a celebrant. I'm the person stood at the front delivering your service. Carl is a funeral director. He's the one who's going to be meeting you the first time after you've lost a loved one, making some of the arrangements. But there's a whole host of other people involved in putting a funeral together. So sometimes we hear the phrase funeral arranger. So what does a funeral arranger do?
Yep, so I think I can come in on this one, Nichola, definitely. So there are, in every funeral business, they have different sort of roles for people. So traditionally and historically, a funeral director would come at the point of death, bring your loved one into care, and then do everything from start to finish. So they would start by arranging things from where we're looking at if it was a church or if it was a crematorium, the burials. They would help arrange the flowers, put the, arrange the organist, and everything in between. Now, other companies also have different setups. So you've got things like funeral arrangers who often go into families and speak to them and literally arrange their funeral, and then a funeral director on the day conducts the service.
So that's kind of the funeral arrangements, putting the logistics together, booking your cars, booking the venue. But you might also hear the term officiant, which is the person who's going to take the service. So we want to show you that we are human. And to do that, I'm going to start off by bollocking Carl, because in his introduction, if you've watched the video, I think, what did you call me, Carl?
I think I might have called you a humanist celebrant, which I do apologise for. Let's start that as well. There is an apology there.
And there's nothing wrong with humanist celebrants. But Carl must have stood in hundreds of my services and heard me say, I'm Nichola Reeder. I'm an independent celebrant. So 10 out of 10 for your listening skills there, Carl.
Yeah, thanks, yeah.
But just to clear that up, because it is something that people often say to me, we wanted a humanist for this service. I'm not sure I entirely understand. So humanists come on and tell me that I'm wrong. But the way I think about it is, it's like a sliding scale. And at one scale, you have ministers or priests who will deliver you a fully religious service. And on the other side, you have humanists who, I believe the phrase is, reject faith and believe in the person, so therefore wouldn't put things in like a Lord's Prayer or a hymn into a funeral. As an independent celebrant, I sit in the middle where I kind of just think about what's right for you, what do you want as a family, and that's what we put together. Neither are right or wrong, it's entirely about what you want as a family for your loved one. Which, Carl, is a really important point, because now more than ever, funerals are about choices and what a family want, and that's what you hope to do, is present those choices to them for them to decide.
I fully agree. When I first started this job over 12 years ago, there wasn't even anything. There was no such thing as a celebrant. You had three choices. You were either a Catholic, you were a Methodist, or you were the Church of England. And rightly so, as you refer to that scale, if you think of one end of the scale, you've got your Catholic service, and the Catholic priest would come and you would have, potentially a full Catholic Mass. Then you've got your Church of England and your Methodist ministers. And then obviously just recently there's been this huge explosion of humanists or non-religious services. I think that's the best way, non-religious services. But families still have that pull towards or something. Let's just have a little bit of a Lord's Prayer in that, or even a hymn. And I think what I'd like to get over in this podcast as well is that there is so much choice for families, that there is no right and wrong answers to a funeral. It really is a case of the families tell us what they want, and then we as funeral directors or as arrangers put that together for the families.
And if you could see me now, I am nodding my head vigorously at Carl, because it is very much about choice and what's right for you as a family. There is no right or wrong, and within the bounds of legality, we will always try and do what we can for you. We have talked in the past about we're not able to sacrifice goats at the altar yet. I don't think, Carl.
Allowed at the minute.
But within the realms of what's possible, then definitely it's about the choice that you want. And even it doesn't have to be a crematorium or church anymore. It could be anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we've done funerals in the past. We've done them in village halls. Obviously, we're living in Richmond. We have actually done a service in the Georgian Theatre before, which was absolutely biblical. But yeah, it's the choice is there, and I think again we're talking about the families that we're going to be listening to this. But I also think this potentially would help funeral directors and people within the industry just to make sure that they are offering all of these services to every family.
And I think when you talk to families, particularly if a death has happened very suddenly and there's a huge degree of shock, what they can often feel like is very out of control, as though they have no focus, they're not in control of anything. So actually the funeral is a great opportunity to put them back in control of that process for them to make the decisions. So I'm going to put you on the spot just for a second here, and you can have a moment to think about it. But what do you think is the most extravagant or most extreme request that a family have made from you so far?
Wow, so that's a loaded question if ever I've heard one. I would say the most extreme requests was a family who were really into their falconry, and they wanted something special, something different for their loved one. And we spoke about at the beginning of the arrangement, we spoke about the doves flying. It was at a crematorium, and I sort of suggested having doves flying away, and instantly they said, "Oh, no, we're not having doves. That's not for us. We need to look into kestrels or hawks." And by the end of the funeral, we'd had a couple of hawks down, a couple of peregrine falcons, and we'd even had a golden eagle at the service. It's absolutely unbelievable.
It sounds absolutely stunning. And it sounds much better than the request sometimes that's made of me as a Rotherham United fan to wear either a Sunderland shirt or a Newcastle shirt, which I will do, but it will absolutely break my heart. But costume and what we wear is often what celebrants are asked for. So I've been a Disney princess, something my husband would probably say I am every day, but I actually dressed up as one. And also I've been a Viking, I've been a pirate, I've been all sorts of things. So that really is as much colour and as much fun as you want to bring to a service. But we can be a little bit more traditional. Carl, you probably see more of that than me with perhaps services in church or with ministers, but there is still a place for the more traditional funeral if that's what people want.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you've got, the services in church. You always have to be very respectful to the church and ultimately include the ministers in the service, things like the music suggestions and so on. The requests for clothing and dressing up and so on, I personally haven't had any, thankfully, but, we do look at changing things up. So historically, funeral directors have always been in dark clothes, so pinstripe trousers, black tailcoats, black top hats, and that's pretty much it. But now, obviously, with services changing, we are looking into changing things up slightly. So you can throw in the odd coloured tie or the change of coloured socks and things like that. And that's where we stand. And that's fine for me. I don't mind, popping on a different coloured tie. Certainly.
So earlier in this episode, I did mention that we really wanted this to feel human. So no doubt you can hear a few little whines in the background from our lurcher, and you might hear us banging our beer cans off the table, because yes, we are sat round our kitchen table on a very Sunday, Friday evening recording this, but it is human. We're not in some posh studio somewhere. We are literally just trying to do this in the best way that we can for you guys. So apologies for the sound effects. But what you might think so far is that we're kind of meandering around lots of topics, and that's very much what we wanted to do in this first episode, to give you a flavour of some of the things we might talk about, some of the things that we have experience from. But certainly for me going forward, our episodes are going to be more structured and bring up some of those topics around things like, what can I put into the actual ceremony itself? What's appropriate? Why is it so expensive to have a funeral? Some of those topics we'll explore in much more detail. But Carl, what are the thoughts in your head that you've got about the topics that would be interesting for listeners?
Thank you. So there's so many different topics that we could look into. But the main one I'd like to talk about is cremations and looking into what actually happens with that person's ashes. I think that's one of the main questions we get asked as funeral directors, definitely.
And that leads us on brilliantly, as if it was scripted and planned, to our first feature of every episode, which will be your listener question of the week. So we'd really like to know what you want to hear about. So the question that we're asking this week, that everyone's been texting us about, is, will it just be my loved one's ashes I get back? Or is it a combination of everybody that the crematorium has cremated that day? And Carl, do you have an answer for that?
I do, actually, funnily enough, yes. So when I first started as a funeral director, I was genuinely made to go and watch a cremation take place, so I could inform families of the exact thing that happens and make sure that everything that I tell families is the truth, of course. So not a chance that when we hand over families' ashes that it is a mixture of everybody that's been cremated that day. That just doesn't happen. There is rules, regulations, and there would just be absolute uproar if we just handed some sort of ash over to a family and went from there. Definitely not. It doesn't happen. Guaranteed.
And what we would really love more than anything is for a crematorium manager to come on and have a chat with us about how it works, what happens when a family leave the crematorium, what's next for their loved one, how their ashes and when their ashes are returned to them. So if you're a crematorium manager and you'd like to be on our show, please do get in touch. But can I just put a fun fact of the week in here? So I was in Stockton Crematorium this week. Big shout out to Darren and Erin over there. And we were just chatting about the podcast and about where this might go. And what they were telling me that I didn't realise was that the titanium joints that are sometimes left over after a cremation are then sent to a company for recycling. And that recycling company resells quite a lot of that material back to Tesla. So if you've got a Tesla, you could be driving around in Uncle Jim's false leg, which I think is brilliant. Carl, anything you've ever heard on that one?
Yeah, no, I haven't heard that, but obviously I know it does happen that the titanium and everything does get reused and it is moved on. When we are arranging funerals, there is a point at the arrangement where we ask if anybody does want anything returning to them. So any titanium stuff or limbs or anything else that potentially they may have with them. But in all the years I've been doing it, no one's ever really wanted anything back. So, I'm not really sure what you would do with them. You'd make them into ashtrays or what, or, reuse them. I'm not sure.
Into cars, obviously. Ask Mr. Musk. That's what's happening with them. So that, as I say, will be a feature of our show every week, that question of the week. So please do get in touch. Slide into our DMs on Over My Dead Poddy on Insta or Facebook. Or you can email us at overmydeadpoddy@gmail.com and just send us your questions that you would like answering. But one of the other things that we really want to bring in to every episode is some inspiration for you to think differently about how you might plan your loved one's service, what's available, what's possible. So we're going to have a feature called Our Fondest Funeral Moments. And those will be those times that maybe the hair stood up on the back of our neck, maybe we laughed until we cried with our families about the service we put together, but perhaps something that was just a little bit different that stuck with us to give you some inspiration about what might be possible for your loved one's service. So Carl, do you have a fondest memory for us this week?
I do, yes. I have many fond memories, of course, throughout my years in funeral directing. But there's one that's very close to home to me, which was a difficult funeral, I'll be honest. It really was very difficult, as it was a school teacher. And the particular school teacher, unfortunately, died in very suddenly, very tragic circumstances. And this quickly turned into a very large celebration of this gentleman's life. We had everything from matching tartan ties. We had, he was involved in a cycling club. We had the entire cycling team cycle behind the hearse. Of course, being a school teacher, it was only right that we did a quick detour into the school grounds. And at that point, we had a piper pipe us through the school. And that was really, it was one of those moments where you have the hair stand on your neck. The entire school, there was hundreds of kids stood out in the yard and not one of them made a sound. You genuinely could hear a pin drop and it was like, oh my Lord, wow. The piper playing and us just gently processing through, it was just one of those moments. And it was a real tough moment, but one of these moments you could be proud of because, it was just, it worked. Everything fitted as it should.
It's one of those moments where we can do hundreds of services, but everyone, there'll be something in that service that stops you in your tracks and just makes you think, oh, that is so beautiful or so poignant. And the one that I wanted to mention this week was up at Blue House Natural Burial Service up in County Durham, their natural burial ground, which is absolutely beautiful. But it's also really, really tough on a rainy, cold, wet day. So I had a service there for a young woman, quite tragic circumstances, had children. And it was a really rainy, really grey day. But the family had asked for quite a lot of content, quite a few songs. So we had quite a long service. And we all endured this in the rain. I had an umbrella over me held by one of the pallbearers. I was trying to juggle my phone, a speaker, my script. And everyone was just, on an already difficult day, feeling just a little bit more miserable because of the circumstances. And we did a poem right at the end of the service called Look for Me in Rainbows, which is a beautiful poem. We'll put a link to it in the show notes. Really gorgeous poem. And just as I started to read that, the rain just stopped and a rainbow just peeped out from behind the clouds. And I looked over to the mum of the young woman whose service we were at, just caught her eye, and she winked at me. just to kind of say, do you know what? It's going to be okay. And it was a really, really beautiful and poignant moment that made a really difficult situation just livable for everybody. And it's those moments where they stick in your mind forever, and you think, however hard it is, we're just here to hold your hand and help you get through it.
I also think on that point is that the old cliches of time's a good healer or things will get easier, these little moments genuinely make that true. And the difficult part for families is the firsts of everything. So the first birthdays, the first Christmases, first anniversaries, but they will always revert back to the time when the clouds parted, or the rain stopped, or when they just had that moment. They can think back and just think, yeah, everything's going to be all right. Everything's going to be fine.
And I think for us, our job is to try and help you find those moments of light and those moments where we can smile during a service, because so often families say to me, I just don't want it to be sad all the way through. This is difficult enough without us having to sit there and it be doom and gloom for 20 minutes. We'd rather have some jokes and some levity balanced with the seriousness and the solemnity of the situation. But we'd like to get both of those across. So I think that's a really, really crucial point. Don't ever feel guilty about if you do want some of those moments of light touches in your service.
And also, when we do have these services and families do get up, it's all right to call somebody a cantankerous old sod. It's fine. Just let it go. If that's what they were, then let's hear it, because everybody in the congregation will know who you're talking about. Definitely.
It's such a good point, because what we don't want to do is sanitize anybody's life if they were an absolute little git. And one of the questions I'll always ask you if I'm working with you as a family is to say, all of this is lovely, but what drove you absolutely bloody mental? And let's mention that. And I love a good sweary service. And if your loved one swore a bit, well, then let's add that into the script as well, because people will expect that. So let's be honest in those services. But I think we're going to wrap up episode 1 just here and leave you hanging on for episode 2, where we're going to tackle those firsts. So what happens when you first start to think about maybe needing to contact a funeral director? It might be before your loved one's passed away, it might be just after. But all of the questions you're likely to be asked and the things to be starting to think about in those first conversations with funeral directors or arrangers or with an officiant. So thank you so much for listening. We really, really value your feedback. So please do get in touch with us. Leave us a review, share the links to the podcast. Make sure your friends know all about us if you think they could benefit from listening to the show too. Get in touch with us. Our details will be available at the end of the show. And let us know what you want us to talk about. And we can't wait for you to join us on the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening, and we really hope you enjoyed and were inspired by this week's episode. Remember that you can get in touch with us anytime to ask a question, offer to be a guest, or to request that we bust a particular myth. You can get in touch via any of our social accounts over My Dead Poddy on Facebook, Insta or TikTok, or you can drop us an email at overmydeadpoddy@gmail.com. Just a reminder that whilst all of us work in the funeral industry, none of us are fully qualified grief counsellors, and therefore if you've been affected by any of the issues that we've discussed today, we highly recommend that you seek out professional or medical support to help you with those conversations. Should you need any support, please do get in touch and we can hopefully signpost you in the right direction, but we can't offer those services ourselves. Thanks for listening, and we can't wait to bring you the next episode.